Good morning on this Sunday, November 17th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. If you're planning to apply online for the U.S. Senate seat, your deadline is here. Atlanta sports teams make a play for sports betting, and for the first time, the city of Atlanta has a transportation commissioner. The gang is all back. Theron, Phil, Janelle, Alexis. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Tomorrow at 5 p.m. That's your deadline to apply for the U.S. Senate seat, and then it's decision time for Governor Brian Kemp. Who will he pick to replace the retiring Senator Johnny Isakson? Phil, we've heard several names. We've heard Congressman Doug Collins, State Representative Jan Jones. We've heard Jackie Gingrich Cushman, but I'm hearing that one of the top picks, and the announcement could come as soon as Tuesday, is Chief Justice Harold Melton.
I hear that, and we can speculate for as long as we want here in this segment, but I think there'll be 500 people bitterly disappointed from the list of applicants. But, so I think we're down to about 3. I know that Congressman Doug Collins made a big pitch last weekend during the football game, and but I think the governor probably knows as we tape who is going to do it. So we shall wait. He needs to do it fairly quickly because this has got to be somebody that can immediately set up an office and raise money. And then the Democrats will get to know what to do.
That's right. Theron, you know, you've pushed pretty hard for an African-American candidate or a female candidate that the governor should pick. What do you think if it's somebody like Harold Melton?
Now, I'm not going to take any credit for that.
Not this week.
Not this week. No, I think that this governor has had a very methodical process. We've all heard that he's interviewed people, and I think he asked some very poignant questions to these potential candidates. But what's so interesting is that if Chief Judge Melton is the selection, and I think that there are a lot of folks that think that there are still some others that may be considered, it's going to show how far we've come as Georgia when you have a Republican governor like Brian Kemp who will choose an African American. And I'm not sure if he aligns himself with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, because we really don't know, because he hasn't really had much partisan participation. But if that were to happen, then I think the Democrats have got to look at who they pick and who they want to run, because now it changes the dynamics a bit.
Janelle, what about this idea of picking somebody who's kind of outside of the political circles? You know, we really haven't seen somebody like Chief Melton on the campaign trail. We don't know where he stands with President Trump. So what about this idea of picking kind of a political outsider, even though he's well known inside the circles?
Yeah, well, I know Metro Atlanta is going to be the focus during this time, and that's a very area that sways both ways. So I think it's good to pick someone who may be in the middle. However, we don't know, though. I mean, he may be a hard Republican, and, you know, because of his position, he remained in the middle. So I think it's a good move if it pans out properly, or it's going to go horribly bad.
Alexis, weigh in
Well,
here.
I think I agree with Janelle's assessment. I think it depends on how he performs when it comes time for him to run the campaign, and he hasn't had to do that in the past. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if he is the choice.
I would just segue on that real quick to both your points. And how it could go horribly wrong is if he's perceived by the base of the Republican Party as some sort of, and I'm using these labels loosely, moderate Romneyite who the conservative base doesn't like, and then that would force a candidate to run on the right of this candidate. Now, the left has the same problem, too, because it's just to remind the viewers, it is a free-for-all, and as many candidates as possible, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever, will run. And so it's tricky for both parties here.
It is. I think, you know, it's difficult for Brian Kemp to decide because he's not going to please everybody.
Right.
If he pleases his base, he's not going to please the middle.
And Phil's been telling us that the Republican Party in Georgia is a middle-right party, right, Alexis? That's what we've been hearing.
Center-right.
Center-right, yeah, okay. Sorry, center-right.
Center-right. Get my phraseology.
So if the governor were to select a sort of person in the center, then I think the challenge is going to be, what would the Republican base that is primarily made up of white men, think about this African American male being the pick by this Republican governor. And so I think that the base is going to have a lot to say in
It's not a problem with an African American male. It's a problem with the politics of the person that the governor appoints.
Yeah, I kind of want to jump in on that one. I think in the Republican Party, we really don't put as much emphasis on the color of skin as we see in the Democratic Party. So I don't think it's an issue with him being an African American. I think it just goes back to whether or not he is going to, vote in the interest of our values, and I think that's what people are more concerned about.
Well, I'd also like to say that the Republican Party in Georgia primarily doesn't have to focus on identity because they're mostly all white, and so there's no reason to focus on that. However, I do want to add that I think with Milton coming in, and I lost my thought that quickly, trying to make my push back on what she said. But we can come back.
Okay, we can move on because we have got a lot of news this week. Democrats from all over Georgia and the U.S. will descend on Metro Atlanta for the 5th presidential Democratic debate. Georgia Democrats say this is a huge opportunity for them, and it proves that Georgia is in play next year.
Coming to Atlanta, the cradle of the civil rights movement, the birthplace of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the home of Congressman John Lewis, everything about this is symbolic, and the symbolism matters.
Democratic Party of Georgia Chair Nikema Williams says hosting the Democratic presidential debate on November 20th will shine a spotlight on our state. The event will be held at the Oprah Soundstage at the brand new Tyler Perry Studios in Southwest Atlanta, which Williams says was an intentional choice to showcase the history and growth of Georgia. So far, 10 candidates have qualified, including frontrunners Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders. And it's no coincidence the party chose Georgia to host this debate. Williams says the state is very much a battleground state.
The National Party is seeing exactly what we're seeing right here on the ground, that we are, the Georgia Democratic Party is the present and future of not just the state, but the country. And what we saw in 2018 was that we have the numbers here to win. We have to stay engaged and turn our people out to vote and protect their right to vote so that we can finally bring it home in November 2020.
Theron, did you get a sneak peek of the stage or any of the, can you give us any scoop, and how do you score a ticket? A lot of Democrats want to know.
Well, I'm not entering the debate about tickets, so I don't have any, so don't call me. No, I think that this process has been handled very well, and while State Senator Nikema Williams deserves some credit, I think Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms deserves as much, if not more, credit, because this was the vision of her and her team saying, hey, let's bring this to Atlanta. But I can tell you this, is that Tyler Perry deserves a lot of accolades for this. I mean, not only is he's opened up his entire studios, I mean, he's going to put a lot of time and effort into this. And I think that, for it to be in Southwest Atlanta, this area where he's built the studios will show. But listen, I would tell you this. All the candidates I've heard from all the campaigns, they're not just going to come in here and do this debate, but they're going to do a lot of events the day after too. And so Georgia is going to get inundated with a lot of positivity from the National Democratic Party. I think that local Democrats will be able to capitalize on that going forward.
I also think the national reputation that Stacey Abrams has from Georgia has contributed to this too, because they're paying attention now, especially with the 2020 fight campaign that she's leading up around the battle states.
All right, well, Janelle, we didn't get a chance to talk about this because it was happening as our taping happened last week, but you went to President Trump's rally to court African American voters. Talk about that and the impact that it had, because a lot of the critics were saying, oh my gosh, there were only 300 people in that room. A very small turnout.
Believe me, there was 3 times as many outside. The only critique I have is that the room wasn't big enough. There was a lot of support, and the awesome thing about it is that the president led with results. He led with statistics, and he didn't come, it wasn't just to court African American voters, but it was to show what this presidency has done for the African American community. So I'm interested to see that when the Democratic debate happens, how much of the discussion is going to be around what Democrats have done over the last 50 years.
Phil, a lot of Republicans are criticized, Republican candidates are criticized for not reaching out to the African American community, and here is President Trump doing so, but he's also getting criticized for it.
Well, that's been a criticism from the left. I think it's changed dramatically. I go to Republican meetings and I see more minorities than ever. At the World Congress Center in 2016, I was amazed at black veterans, black blue-collar workers. You were there. I think that I think that that's changing. I know Theron and Alexis like to mock the Republican Party, but I think it was a great showcase. You can't disagree with the statistics, what this president has done for everybody, including African Americans.
I don't.
Okay, go ahead,
I was
Alexis.
just going to say I don't appreciate you characterizing me as mocking the Republican Party. I don't. I just like the.
You just said it's an all-white party just a few minutes ago.
The numbers prove
The
that.
numbers
You know what?
show
That is
that.
Georgia. My point is it's changing. You don't like it, and I know
what
it
I'm
upsets
suggesting
you.
is that President Trump is not representative of the Republican Party. I don't think. I think
Well, he
is.
got elected president,
Theron, last few words.
and he beat 17 other Republicans.
I'm going to allow Theron to have the last few
He has a
words.
history
No, listen,
of
I wanna-
being involved in Democratic.
I want to say
Party.
this: as someone who worked for a former president, for Janelle to go there and get a picture with her husband, with the president of the United States, is a big deal, and we should congratulate her for that. I think the thing that we got to remind our viewers is that President Trump only got 8% of the black vote in 2016. 3% of that was African American women, and so I think that while it's a good gesture for a president to focus on any demographic, but to really kind of dig into his record since he's been president, I think there are some holes there that are going to be exploited.
Well, I just want to say
Last
something
word.
really
We
quick.
really gotta go.
Yeah, to
Y'all
that
are doing
point.
this again to
I mean,
me.
I know even though he did get 8%, the fact that he is focusing on 8% that supported him shows that this is not just about race, but it's about all people, and he recognizes that the African American community has been grossly neglected.
Okay, well,
his
coming
language
up,
does not reflect that.
will you soon be able to bet on your favorite sports team legally in Georgia? Will this be the year lawmakers take another step in the fight over gambling? We'll discuss.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
They just promised me during the break that they would follow my cues. So, anyway, looks like
Give us another chance.
legalized gambling in the form of sports betting might have a shot in the Georgia legislature this session, with the big backing of Atlanta's four major sports teams, the Braves, the Falcons, the Hawks, and Atlanta United. Theron, your thoughts on this?
Listen, I think that, Phil has said this for a long time. I think that sports betting, and just in the U.S., but particularly in Atlanta, has always kind of seen some momentum the last 3 years. I think what's so key this time is that you see that legislators on the Democratic side and the Republican side are asking some tough questions. How would it be regulated and how would it be monitored? We don't want people to be able to do things inappropriate with the betting. But when you have the Atlanta Braves and you got, I think, the Falcons that are interested, I think the Hawks are interested. This is sort of a way to move forward in this state. And so I know that it's going to dominate the first part of the legislative session. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
Phil, these are the insiders coming in to lobby for it,
Well,
not
that's
the
right.
outsiders from Vegas.
That's right. I do agree with Theron's analysis, and I think it'll be a roll of the dice during the
He was
legislature
waiting for that.
to see if we get it. And it will be tied in. It will be tied in with pari-mutuel horse wagering, and it will be tied in with the destination casino resorts.
Well, that was just going to be my point. It's
That will
not
be a
destination
big
type
package
of-
together. It'll be a constitutional amendment, which, yes, will have to be voted on by 2/3 of both chambers, just for viewers to know how this process would work. And then, if it passed, then it would go to a statewide referendum, and then you would still have the local option component.
But aren't they looking at some way to avoid going to the constitutional amendment by not keeping the destination gambling out of it and pari-mutuel, just making it a wagering
That is a
issue?
possibility.
As we tape, they are debating it, but as we tape, I think the lawyers say you have to have a constitutional amendment. And it would be-
Regardless?
Yeah.
Regardless.
And I think the voters are going to ultimately make the decision. And this is the one thing that I think that Democrats and Republicans agree. And Governor Deal, when he was there, we talked a lot about destination resort casinos. He said that, hey, if it ever got to actual vote, he would support whatever the voters decided. So let me tell you this, as someone who worked on the casino gambling, it's still a long way away from actually passing the legislature, but it does have the momentum it needs going into the session.
Y'all have your messaging down, because it's not just casinos, it's destination
And
resort
they're
gambling
new revenue
casinos.
streams.
Good job on
Right,
that.
and it would go to the lottery that would support education.
For Hope Scholarships, right. Well, in a surprising turn of events, State Senator Brandon Beach dropped out of the 6th congressional race. Phil, do you have any insight on this? This was kind of surprising.
Well, it was a surprise. I spoke with him Thursday evening, and he was torn. He said he had to think about it for a couple weeks. He's talked to the governor, fellow senators, lieutenant governor. He's a very prominent state senator from Alpharetta. He's known as a go-to person for a lot of legislation that we talk about here on the gang.
Gambling was one of them.
And
right?
destination resort
Skis,
gaming
yes.
is a gaming. Is a, I don't have a client, but I just like the messaging.
Yeah.
And everybody laughs when you say gaming, but anyhow, the point is that that I think that he wanted to just stay put and finish some things. And to be honest with you, in that 6th district race where he was running against former incumbent Karen Handel, they both are going to vote the same way if they ever were in Congress.
And why let that race get nasty?
Yeah,
Right.
I
And
think
Aaron-
I think that was a factor.
And Senator Beach has a lot of power under that gold dome. He's very popular. He does a lot of moderate issues as well as conservative. I mean, transportation, gaming, just to name a couple.
I mean, look, personally, you know, I'm actually kind of happy that he's coming back to the legislature because Democrats have been able to work with him. I mean, he was one of the first Republicans to come out and support mass transit. I mean, he's been talking about, you know, gambling to help with the economy. But more importantly, I think that it was really a good show of leadership for the governor and him to have a conversation and for them to publicly come out and talk about it. But I think there's one thing I must add is that I think the canary in the gold mine, the canary in the coal mine was the defeats that happened in the city of Dunwoody, I think Roswell, Johns Creeks, and I think you see the suburban sort of thing that we've been talking about, which is I think a lot of these disaffected Republican women are not voting for people who are, you know, maybe in a nonpartisan race that maybe aligns more to the Republican Party. So I think while Chairman Beach made the decision that was best for his family, I think that we have to make sure that the canary in the coal mine is that the demographics are changing. I think it was evident in these recent elections.
Right.
Yeah, I have to say, I agree with Theron on that one, and I appreciate anyone who can look at the data to determine whether or not it's a good move. And primaries are tough. You know, it's you're voting. You're honestly running against a lot of people for a small group of individual votes. So good for him for
Right,
making
and
a
I
decision.
happened to see him and Steve Gooch at a Southern Legislative Conference on Thursday evening, and I like the way that he's taken control of that whole transportation issue and sharing with the other states, and so I think he'd be good and stay there.
I agree, and I think his decision really just says a lot about the character of Senator Beach. I mean, this is why
He wanted some projects.
he's for the party.
He wanted projects finished that he'd been working
Right.
on.
All right. Well, coming up, the city of Atlanta has its first transportation commissioner. Stay tuned.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms announced Josh Rowan will be the city of Atlanta's first transportation commissioner. And Theron, I want to get your take on this because you say this actually reduces kind of the size of government.
Well, I think it does. I mean, we know that while transit and transportation and infrastructure has been a big part of this mayor's legislative agenda, but also want to make sure that we have safer streets, Josh was the perfect pick because he spent a lot of time with Renew Atlanta, which we know does a lot of great projects around the city. But the display of the support from MARTA and other different transportation agencies and the council showed me that there was a large amount of support for basically consolidating while reducing all the different departments to have a commissioner that now wakes up every morning and is going to work in a collaborative way with all these different departments at the city, at the state, and the federal government. So I think this was just a really big deal for the mayor and the city council and the entire city of Atlanta.
And Janelle, you actually agree with Theron on this issue as well.
Yeah, I
Two
do.
for two here.
I know.
Y'all are keeping track.
Right, 2 for 2.
I'm relaxed
All
today,
right. Yeah, I do. I think this is good to open this up. I mean, transportation is a hot topic, and we need to make sure we centralize it so that it's not kind of going all over the place. So, you know, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important too with the advent of the scooter issue.
Yes.
And electronic, whatever that is, scooters, right?
Right.
That it's not just looking at cars and traffic, it's looking at the whole use of the city and the way people can move around more frequently.
I'm generally in favor of consolidation too. It's going to be $750,000, you know, first hit. My one caveat is that one of the worst departments in the city of Atlanta is the Public Works Department. I hope it can be reformed. I wish that $750,000 could have gone to the pothole filling in the whole city,
Well,
which is a
that would
disgrace.
be part of it too.
Well,
which is
why
good
isn't it
thing.
part of it now? Why aren't they doing it
because
now?
there's so many
Phil,
that need to be filled,
Phil,
but this will be coordinated.
After the show, I'm going to download the app for you. I know I've mentioned on the show before that you can go to and see
I know
that this mayor has filled almost 20,000 potholes. And I do want to push back a little bit.
I'm going to answer that because I live in Sandy Springs, but unfortunately,
we ain't talking about Sandy Springs.
One of the problems in Sandy Springs is we still foolishly have a contract with the Public Works Department of Atlanta. I've been trying to get a pothole filled in my neighborhood that the city has to do, and Sandy Springs said they're incompetent.
Well, if you go down there in person with Theron.
Oh, okay. So I have to. Is that how it works?
My security guards in the front in Trinity, they watching all the great police officers. They're waiting for you to come down.
It's the Democrat machine politics.
But the Department of Public Works does a really good job. I mean, I think I have to push back on that a lot. As someone who actually represents clients that work with them, is that this is a massive undertaking. I mean, if you just look at the roles and responsibilities of the Department of Public Works, it's massive. But one of the things about this new created commissioner position is that primarily one of the things that people struggle with, but they're doing a better job, is getting permits to close streets and to build new roads and things. And so I think that with the consolidation of this and the Public Works being kind of in conjunction working with this new department, I think you're going to see mass improvements. But this mayor has done a really good job on the pothole filling field.
All right, well, I want to move on because I really want to get to this AJC poll that was conducted by the University of Georgia. A majority of Georgians, according to this survey, disapprove of the president's performance, and President Trump could actually face a really tough matchup among the top 5 Democrats. About 54% of Georgia voters disapprove of the job he's doing, and former Vice President Joe Biden would beat Trump 51 to 43% in Georgia. We go back to the debate story, a true battleground state.
Well, let me just weigh in at first. I think, and I've been critical of this UGA poll for a number of reasons. I think you can throw it in the trash can because, number one, it's too reliant on, and this is a rookie mistake that they need to fix. If you look at the crosstabs, and everybody should look at the crosstabs, it says that these are registered voters that they surveyed. That is a rookie mistake. You need to do likely voters like most pollsters do. In fact, there was about 2 million registered voters in Georgia that never voted last year. And secondly, it's weighted 70% to cell phones. This is another rookie mistake. It's totally skewed it. And then if you look at the education level, they have over 50% that have college graduate or postgraduate work. There's only, if you look at the U.S. Census, Lori and Theron, it's only 30% of people in Georgia. It is totally skewed. I recommend that they get a professional polling expert and try to fix what is a broken UGA poll.
Well, and I think also, the polls got it wrong last time around too. The Trump supporters, when asked, Trump under polls. That was evident 4 years ago. We'll see what happens this time around. Darren, weigh in on the poll, and then we'll have to go.
I don't care who you are. If you have a president of the United States of America that's below 45% in any state, that shows you that I think there's going to be a tough battle ahead for him to get reelected. While I disagree with Phil on attacking the credibility of the poll, and he knows as someone who has worked on a bunch of campaigns as I have, is that you can manipulate the numbers. But at the end of the day, I think that when you go head to head and you ask the voters, whether it's a cell phone, whether they're educated or not educated, as Phil likes to discriminate against people who are not as educated, is that if you ask them if the election, if you ask if the election were today,
he loves the poorly educated.
yeah. If you ask it a simple question, which I think people can.
Okay, let Darren finish.
Sorry.
When people can just comprehend the one simple question, if the election were today, would you vote for Donald Trump or a Democratic opponent, which I think people can comprehend? For him to have less than 45%, I think shows that Georgia is in play.
He won the presidency with a 44. He won the presidency with a 44% approval rating.
All right, well, you guys, we need time for winners and losers, so y'all are just route up today. But we will be back with winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
We'll have to be quick with winners and losers, and Janelle, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so my winner is my friend, First Lady Marty Kemp. She announced this week $153 million of grants are going towards fighting human trafficking, and I think that's really awesome. I love the work she's doing, so kudos to you.
That is her issue, so that's great.
All right.
Alexis.
Thank you. I'm going to go to name the people that I didn't name last week for the Hospitality Hall of Fame for the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau, starting with Leona Barr Davenport of the Atlanta Business League, Ed Bastian of Delta Airlines, Renee Perdue Rucker of the Atlanta Downtown Ambassador Force, and Gary Stoken of the Peach Bowl. And then the Atlanta Press Club Hall of Fame inducted Jocelyn Dorsey of WSB-TV, retired, Lino Dominguez, founder of Mundo Hispanico, and Jim Cantori of the Weather Channel, and Louis Grisard posthumously. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
Okay.
Can I do one more?
One more quickly, if
Okay.
Phil lets you.
Melody Maddox is set to
Yes.
take over the position of sheriff of DeKalb County. As such, she'll be the first woman to do so.
First female sheriff at DeKalb. All right. Thank you, Phil.
One of my losers, speaking of DeKalb County and sheriffs, is Jeff Mann. He's finally, we finally are getting rid of him. He's resigning. He's a disgrace to the uniform. You remember he was arrested in Piedmont Park, and he should have been, he broke the law, and yet he was kept on. Big loser. I would say that, you know, it was Veterans Day last Monday, and I just wanted to give a shout out to my own post, the American Legion Post 29 in Marietta,
Yes.
with Commander Walt Cusick. It's the biggest one in the state. They do a lot of charity work.
Very nice. All right, Darren.
I want to make my winner Alexis Crawford, and I want to express my condolences to her family. This is the Clark Atlanta University student who was murdered, and
So
she's
tragic.
also from Athens, Georgia. So I had a chance to speak to her mom, and I just want to send my sincere condolences. Also, I missed a couple weeks ago, but MARTA celebrated 40 years in service, and so they had a wonderful event. They sort of did a reenactment of the first ride from DeKalb to Atlanta, and they went in reverse back to Atlanta to DeKalb. So I want to give them a shout out. Of course, Josh Rowan is a winner from the city of Atlanta. And then lastly, I want to commend Teresa Hardy and attorney D.E. Smith. They got approval this week from the DeKalb County Commission to basically approve a marker to recognize all these lynchings that occurred in our country, primarily African Americans. And they are going to have a lynching that's going to be right in front of the DeKalb County Courthouse in Decatur. So I just want to commend them for working with the DeKalb County Commission to make sure that that history is told in the right way in our country.
All right, thank you. Well, my winner is President Jimmy Carter, who underwent brain surgery to relieve pressure on his brain after several falls. Knock on wood, hopefully we're praying for you. I hope you have another recovery on the way. And Georgia's First Lady, Marta Kemp, she was also on my list. Sometimes I think that you all peek at my list and steal them. But for her work with sex trafficking and that huge $150 million federal grant.
Can I make the governor winner?
You were going to make the governor? We'll make time for that.
Okay.
Quickly.
Because of it goes back to that opening segment when he had 500 people who were going to be disappointed, but it was an opportunity for him to get the names of many people who could be good appointments. So good for him.
All right. Thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.